But right now, this is the Daily Tip presented by BetMGM. I'm Chelsea Messenger. He's Michael Jenkins with all the celeb stories. And we're diving into baseball betting basics. We'll get to maybe some NFL betting basics later in the show or as the summer progresses. But right now, if you need a refresher course on how to bet on baseball, because right now we're at the All-Star break, if you want to jump in on the action the second half of the season, here are some of the basics you need to know. There are multiple ways you can bet on baseball. You can bet on the money line, which is basically which team is going to win. You can bet on the run line if you think a team is going to win by at least 2 runs. If you think you know if it's going to be a high-scoring game or a low-scoring game, you can bet on the total. There are so many ways to bet on baseball, and I think that's the bottom line for me, Jenks. It is taking something you think you know to be true and finding a way to bet on it. Because now with all the sports betting apps and BetMGM having all these options, that's the way to do it. You take advantage of having all of these options and say, hey, you think the starting pitcher is going to go deep in the game. You can play strikeouts. You can play outs. You can play that pitcher to record a win. So bottom line for me is you are trying to find something that you can narrow down. The more you can narrow down, the less factors you have to factor in. I think the easier it is to bet on things, which betting is not easy. But for me, it's about finding that advantage.
I think you're absolutely right. And when you talk about laying the juice or playing moneyline bets in baseball, the reason why it is different in baseball as opposed to another sport is all it takes is one guy. In football, for example, and not that upsets don't happen in any sport, but if you're laying, if it's minus 300 on the money line in football versus minus 300 on the money line in baseball, minus 300 on the money line in baseball is a riskier bet because all it takes is one great pitching performance or maybe one swing of the bat that can change the complexion of the game. And also, as we know, there's 162 games a year. So there are upsets that do happen. Whereas in football, I'm not going to say it's a sure bet. It's maybe a bit more likely. And that's why we always caution on this show, if you bet the Dodgers every single game, you bet the Yankees every single game, and you're laying so much minus money in the money line, over time, you will end up losing. And one of the things that I also think when you look at baseball is at the end of the season, and you know how I am, I love this, betting on the run line, which is generally a run and a half, which means if you're betting for a team minus the run line, they need to win by 2 runs. If you're betting on them plus the run line, they need to stay within a run. But at the end of the season, when we see so much discrepancies between the really good teams in baseball and the really bad teams, you can fade those bad teams because A, they're not motivated, and B, a lot of times they're throwing out pitchers who don't have a lot of experience because they have nothing to lose by putting out there those guys who need that experience, because win or lose, it's not going to affect how they finish the season. So if you find the right spots, you can make some money on the run line in baseball as well. And I've done it a little bit in the first half of the season. That's something I will look at definitely later on in the year, Chelsea.
Especially when you're talking about teams who have good offenses. Usually when I'm betting on run lines, it is extremely helpful if you're betting on a team with a good offense, because think the probability is going to be much more in your favor if this team is capable of scoring 10 runs or 6 runs or 7 runs on any given night. And another angle when playing the run line is sometimes considering the home underdog if you're playing the plus 1.5, because think about it. They have an extra opportunity to score. And if the away team is the favorite, if they're ahead in the top of the ninth, or excuse me, I've got to work this out in my mind. If the favorite is the home team and they're already leading, they're not going to play that bottom of the ninth is what I'm saying. So sometimes playing the underdog on the plus 1.5, which means you can have a team lose by 1 and still win your bet. Sometimes that's a profitable angle as well.
No, that's actually a very good point. And I don't look at that nearly as much as I should, but that's something that absolutely should be pointed out. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and so I think you kind of covered the run line, and that was something that you were very good at betting last season down the stretch when these teams are kind of tanking. There are plenty of other ways to bet on baseball where we see strikeout props. If you think a guy is going to, strike out the side multiple times, first 5 innings, if you want to take out the bullpen out of the equation, which sometimes is a smart play when you're talking about some of these teams who are absolutely terrible in the bullpen, but overall good teams, that's one way to do it. So there are so many ways to bet on baseball. I think it's just targeting the way and the result that you expect to happen and being very specific about it.
Yeah, and also when you talk about following the money, never follow the money blindly because sometimes you'll see the bets on one team, but all the money is on another side. What I would say is take that into consideration and say, hey, is there something I'm missing here? But don't make the mistake of just saying, oh, here's where the money is. That's my bet. It might be the right side, but look at why you're betting that way instead of doing it blindly.
Jenks, this is where betting on baseball and betting on football is extremely different because following the money in football sometimes is a smart play because think you have, an entire week for this to unfold. In baseball, it's a daily sport. So it's a little
Yep.
different.